What's going on, guys? It's RPG Zeke here coming at you with another video. This time, not an unboxing, this time a deck review video. That's right, he finally has other things to do besides an unboxing. For those that didn't know, recently for Battle Spirit Saga, there was something called Summoner Duels. It's an online duel that you do usually over a webcam with a tournament organizer, and they officiate the whole thing. But yeah, your boy did pretty good. I was actually cooking and training. I had like a training montage, a training arc, if you will. Shout out to my training buddy, Scrub Lord over from Main Deck Masters, and many others that I played usually a game or two with. I appreciate you. But I built a deck for this event that actually did pretty good. And so I wanted to review and kind of go through my thoughts, the reason I picked certain cards, and combos you're looking for, or best starting hands. I'm going to review a lot in this video. Because the video is probably going to be a little bit lengthier than some of my unboxings, I'm going to try and fill some of the air with some pretty reels and things I've been practicing on the side. So I hope you guys enjoy the new video format, and let's get into it. How did I do? So this is the top 16 deck list from Eggman Events, and I'm this guy right here. Surprise, surprise, you guys get to know my name now. But I got 4th place, so I went 6-1, and I only lost 1 out of the 7 rounds I played. I think performance-wise, I did really good. I was very proud of myself, and I definitely went in with a better mental than my previous attempt at a best-of-1 format, which was community-driven. I did much better this time around. I was more prepared. As you can see here, the deck list is made up of many things. We've got Hydra, Serpent showed up, Ira, of course, Angels, Hydra, Smog, Ramp. So like top 8 alone, there's already a good amount of variety. As you can see from the pie chart that represents the top 16, really, really good. Like I was very surprised with the turnout. It wasn't as crazy aggro as I thought it was going to be. But we're going to still get into my deck list and kind of talk about why we built it for certain things we were probably going to run into. So let's look at it. What did I play? I played this. So this is my red deck that got me 4th place in the best of 1 format. If you're unfamiliar with the website we're using, we're on bssdb.dev. To kind of showcase it a little bit, you can get breakdowns of things that you're looking at, some valuable information. You can also click on said cards, it'll expand it for you. Obviously, it makes it easier to read, and then you're able to get other really good information. And it's also nice because at a glance, if you look at this, you can kind of derive what you're going to be getting into, or just like an easier snippet than laying out all the cards on the table. So this is how I've been building my Battle Spirits decks. I've been using this website. BSSDB is primarily ran by Bloody Malleus, so if you ever see him in the Discords, any of the Battle Spirits ones, always make sure to give him like a thank you if you use the website. The guy works really hard and doesn't really ask for anything in return, and except for obviously his passion project for loving this game so much is we get this really cool tool utility feature on the database website. We can just build decks to our heart's content. So okay, so let's move on to my deck and the things we're looking at here. So real quick, just at a glance, we are primarily spirits. We got 23 spirits, 6 nexuses, 21 magics, and we are primarily star dragons. So in the current red format, star dragons are very strong, and so that's why I chose to build into it for a best of 1 format. And as I go through some of these cards, you'll kind of see I hope it makes sense with the things I was aiming for or what I was looking to do. I'm going to start from left to right and just kind of review my mental state around why I picked this card and the reason it worked out. As we go through these cards, you will see B-roll of a prettier version of the card with some of the stuff, and then you will probably see at some instances some of the matches I was able to record from the best of 1 format, these cards performing well and just doing their card related abilities. So I hope you enjoy the video as we kind of go through it together. Here we go. All right, so first card, easy 4 of, a card that I've always been impressed by, and I've worked it into several of my decks, is Bark Maiden Lucerium. Bark Maiden Lucerium pays off dividends at so many points in a match. Early game, mid game, late game, very good utility. The fact that she's able to ramp without requiring the soul core was huge for me. So I put her in as opposed to Worker Ant-Man that just kind of falls off and loses utility, I feel like, towards the later half of the game. And so if my best of one went that long, I wanted a card that was good from start to finish, no matter where the match ended. So I went for 4 copies of her for that reason. She can ramp on to another Leaf Kindred, so if you pull two of them out, which I'll show here, they can immediately start working off each other and cause a tremendous threat to your opponent. If they're just feeding cores and ramping each other that much, it's really crazy. The fact that she gets to replace herself when destroyed if you have 3 cores on, regardless of turn or when it happened, just the fact she's destroyed is huge. It's going to play into one of the other cards that I'll kind of talk about as well, but not paying the cost to replace her on something that's 5 or fewer is really good, especially in Star Dragons that can kind of cheapen their cost, and there's all these other things you can drop in return that also are good in that threshold. Yeah, just very good. I can't see myself playing in the current format without a 4 of this card in my current situation, my current play style, and it'll probably continue to stay that way. Next up, we're going to skip this card. We're going to move right into the next big baddie here. Jewel Dragon Smog. Very good card. Being able to represent itself, have all symbols on board for just existing. Being able to represent white, red, purple, yellow, pretty much anything. It's just wild. So universal cost reduction was a big reason I played it, as well as when summon, being able to draw a card if your hand is smaller than your opponent's. Although in red, it doesn't happen all that much since red has very good draw in and of itself. Majority of the time, unless I was in a mirror match, I was typically up on cards in hand. But the other ability of ramping a core just because the body came down onto the board, into the trash, is still really good. Sets you up for a much better time on next turn. Just having another core to use can sometimes be all the difference. So Smog was an easy 4 of in my current situation for that reason, because I was looking to play Lucerium and then hopefully get her killed or do something else to the effect to cheapen out and pull a Smog if needed. There were many times where I had to hard play a Smog to kind of generate momentum if I felt I was getting stalled out, or if I wasn't in a good position or good cost reduction come next turn. I would pay it early, have him out, and then hope he survived to set me up for a better next turn. Next up, we've got a 2 of on the low end still. So we're at Galaxy Dragon Andromedios. She's always been really good to me, and for reference, I say Andromedios is a she. I'm probably not lore accurate. I have no idea. They're dragons. I don't know. I just want to throw that out there. But Andromedios, again, utility, right? So you're seeing that on the bottom end. I'm looking for utility more so than trying to close it early. And I'm also looking for things that help me not get closed out early, as we'll kind of explain in the rest of the deck. But yeah, very good. She's a 2 cost reduction for Star Dragons. So 1 body with a 2 cost for the same archetype I'm playing heavily into. That's awesome. That helped me out a lot to squeak out things that I didn't think were going to be possible. And the other big reason was her searching ability. So when attacking, you can look at the top 3, add 1 Star Dragon to hand, and when majority of my spirits are Star Dragon, I always feel like I was hitting pretty well with Andromedios, or I was shuffling things that I didn't need to the bottom of my deck, because she does not discard them to trash. You just stack the bottom end. And if your match goes on for a while and you're drawing really good in your red deck, there are going to be times where eventually all that stuff you stacked on the bottom from Andromedios or other magics that do the same thing is you're going to eventually hit that pile of cards, and you're going to be more familiar with what you're going to be getting into. Even in a best of 1 format, if you're drawing like a madman, and if you're playing to your heart's content on red and you're just constantly rotating through, pulling from your top by pulling 1 single Star Dragon out and then rotating the stuff to the bottom is just really good. So it's another way of draw and sending stuff to bottom and pulling things out as needed. So she was a 2 of because the consistency, I didn't need her at a lot of times in this deck, but when she shows up, it's great because this card doesn't feel bad in hand. If you have 1 or 2, having 3 or 4 in hand, or 1 on the board and you're just holding all of these, that doesn't feel nearly as good in the current format. So that's why I restricted her to a 2 of as opposed to a 4. Next up is probably the biggest staple you'll see in most red decks, I feel like. is Nebula Dragon Andromeda. Very good card for several reasons. It's a body. When the body comes down, it's doing something. It's removing a nexus. It's killing something that's 3,000 or fewer. And it's got more utility by having Confront on the top end. I used this card so many times to remove nexuses or things that were getting in my way. I used this card to remove bodies if I was feeling threatened from just a win summoned. And you will realize that a lot of these bodies do have a win summoned effect. And there isn't really a threat right now for a win summoned in the burst. I understand that, you know, your opponent pulling 2 or 4 cards or whatever they might have, or bouncing something to hand or exhausting you can become difficult, but if you're playing this deck correctly, I felt like I had a good answer for if something bursted, and a lot of times I wanted them to burst. I want to know what's in that burst slot so I can start playing effectively, having that knowledge into the next turn if needed. So this card was utility, removal, knowledge. It gave me a lot, and Confront on the mirror match is big. Telling your opponent that they can't stand up and they have to exhaust and we have to have this conflict is very good. This card, bar none, I think has to be a 4 of in Star Dragon's list. I could be wrong, obviously, you know, I was only 4th place, so I'm speaking from a lot of what if situations, but as I'm showing hopefully B-roll at this point, this card performed very well, and I was not scared to drop this card on board, just even if there wasn't a target. This card can be played without burning a Nexus. It can be played without burning something with 3,000 or fewer BP, because it is a threat to just exist and be on board. So next up, a 3 of for Dustworm Drought Dragon. Now, before we start talking about the card, the ratio and the reasoning, when I was playing a demo deck that I made for the same deck, but I had a 4 of, the card feels good, but at times it felt like too much of a good thing, if that could even be said for the current format for red. So I sized it down to a 3 of, and that felt a lot better. The card was coming up at weird times that I wasn't expecting to see this many in my hand, and it didn't feel good. So I wanted other things to show up more often than this. So that's why it's at a weird number and it's just at 3. The reduction it gets when you're at 3 life or lower is phenomenal. The fact it comes on board, it's got Awaken, and it can just remove something of 5,000 or fewer BP. I feel like in a best of 1 format, or most current matches, red does have a lot of utility to burn certain thresholds, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. 5,000 definitely feels like the healthy spot for a lot of things. Even after there's several cores on a spirit, it still feels like you can target it at 5,000 or fewer. But in the red mirror, you're not really using it for that utility, because I feel like in a red mirror matchup, I wasn't really popping anything when it came down. I was mainly using it as threat or being a big body to block in response. And so Drought Dragon did really well. And having it at a 3 of felt really good in this deck, and I probably wouldn't change it. Next up is going to be a questionable one. I'll probably get a lot of questions on is Supernova Dragon Seagworm. Or yeah, Nova. No, Supernova Dragon Seagworm Nova. So decks, this card definitely needed in there for utility purpose. I didn't need it a whole lot. So I only went for a 2 of, because I don't need to see it all the time, but when I do see it, I need to make sure I'm in a position of using it. So seeing it early felt dead in hand, didn't feel good. Seeing it mid-game to late game was always better. So I ratioed it to 2 so I could fit other things in this deck. And sure enough, this card came up quite a bit, because as you'll see, I'm drawing without much of an issue in this deck, thanks to Smog, thanks to other magics we'll talk about, and thanks to the top end Ira, which we're going to get into next. Big thing on this one though was I only wanted 2, and I didn't want a whole lot of Seagworm targets by name. I could have played Meteor Seagworm, I could have played Gray Servant of Seagworm. Those cards were not performing well for me in practice. So I ended up cutting those completely and ratioing up other Star Dragons instead, and obviously it worked out pretty well. Combos I would do, even in a best of 1 format, is I would play an Ira, I would clear the board, and because Ira is Seagworm in name, I would ascend again on top of Ira into Seagworm. And some of the B-roll, you will see that there are times where Ira is good given the circumstance, but Nova being able to swing and just kill a BP threshold that's as high as 10,000 added up is really big. That worked out for me in several instances where Nova swinging was much better of an answer than Ira was. And then if I really needed Ira again, if I had a good amount of cards in hand, I would do a combo where I would play Ira, heal with Nova, and then if I could that same turn, and if I needed to attack, I would then ascend again on top of Nova into Ira to close out, to hit more life, if that was the thing I was trying to do, because we're looking at 2 symbols as opposed to 1 from Nova to Ira. And so yeah, Nova performed really well at a 2 ratio, healed several times in the best of 1 format, and I could tell when I healed that it became a very daunting task for the opponent to try and get me back down to 2 or 3 life, as that's usually where I would allow myself to hover, and I wouldn't allow them to take more than that. And you'll see as we move on that being able to keep yourself at that life is very manageable compared to probably just an all red list that I did mirror into several times. Several of the red matches I had, there was one turn where the red player was able to Nova and actually heal. They were able to ascend into Nova and heal, and that's something I didn't expect. And even when they did it, my deck still performed really well, and I was able to get them back down again and obviously close out the match. So that was really interesting. But yeah, Nova, awesome card. I don't see that getting switched out from a Star Dragon list anytime soon. Being able to heal is such a good utility. Really good for red. Last spirit on the list. No surprises here. Rage Star Dragon Sea Worm Ira. A 4 of. Go figure. This is the top end I was constantly getting into. Being able to drop him. Saying, hey, I'm going to kill the whole board pretty much and draw that many cards is huge for a red player. Having your hands stacked with cards is so good in so many instances. Obviously for red, it pays back so many dividends, and with this card being able to clear the board, remove threat, and then immediately go in on attack and see if your opponent had a response. Huge. Loved this card. Used it a whole bunch. As I just talked about, I would constantly ascend Ira, go to Nova, and then sometimes go right back into Ira again if need be. And that's why the ratio on this card is 4. I was willing at most times to get rid of or purposely destroy or purposely do anything or use it as fodder for at least 2 Ira. If I got them early, if I was able to get into them early, I would play it out and see if I could pull any threats from my opponent's hand early and then worry about closing it down later and just maintain surviving until then. It worked out really well. So I would, again, like, this card does so good because it does so many things. Draw, removal. And the reason on the other ascend thing, you're trying to ascend on 6 because you're trying to clear the board. There were instances where I was able to have not only 1 but 2 Iras out. And the reason we're able to do that is because we're ascending on 4 costs. So we would ascend off of Smog. We would ascend off of Andromedios. So that way it doesn't try to kill anything else that might have also been presented on the board at the same time. And that was really good. Like it performed really well ascending off even the low targets. So like, because if you board wipe with 1, you don't have to kill one of your 6 or higher cost spirits to get that connection. You can drop a 4 and then just go into Ira. And so that just felt so dirty at times. And I liked it. It worked really well. Ascending on both 4 costs or higher or 6 costs or higher for the actual board wipe. Really good. Like the card. Easy 4 of. All right, probably my next favorite card in this deck that was so good, I would be willing to call the deck itself just a Temple of the Sunstone, because this Nexus is dirty. Very, very dirty. I'm going to show you B-roll of me pulling draws from it, from player interactions, and the fact that I like this Nexus more than Volcanic Canyon, and that's because it sets a precedence for understanding, especially in a best of 1 format where experiencing a lot of aggressive plays are going to happen, pulling cards as a reward for the opponent going in is a big mental breach. I feel like some players weren't able to get ahead of or really realize the threat that was presenting. There were several times where I had 2 of these down, or I had 1 of them down, and I'm drawing cards off the interaction from the player attacking me with a spirit of 3,000 or fewer BP, and me being able to get more cards as a reward of that, the cost of life, is huge. Keep in mind too, special interactions. When you have this card down and you use Absolute Ice Shield, you still lose that life. And then if you burst into Absolute Ice Shield, you're getting that life back, but you're still drawing as a result of that. And then the nice part about it too is if they want to hang low on the floor with low BP, you're rewarded for that as the red player, because you can go in and start beating them up with your wind summons or your other magic abilities. And when they get higher, because they're trying to not be that low because they don't want you to draw cards, it's also playing into your stance as well as the red player, because your spirits, majority of times or not, have higher BP. So they're trying to put more cores on. They're using more resources to not go wide. And they're thinking, okay, I'm not going to give this guy the draw, so I'm just going to go in with 4,000 BP. But they have more cores tied up on that spirit to do so. And then therefore it allows me to turn around the next turn and get rid of whatever might have been the threat. Temple of Sunstone sets a whole new precedence for best of one. It demands respect. If there's anything to target, it is this Nexus. Just kind of giving you guys all a hint, as opposed to other ones in my opinion. Which brings me to my other Nexus. This Nexus, in a best of one, performed very poorly. In all my practice rounds, I cut it down to a 2 of. When you play the red mirror matchup, even though you get to draw an additional card and ditch a card from hand, with this deck, we're really not trying to ditch anything, but we are trying to create a scenario where the player thinks that, based on prior formats or based on prior knowledge, that this card is the threat. I would put this card down and this card would immediately be removed in the red mirrors. Everybody is, and it's fine to think like this, I'm just saying it's a different perspective, and I played into it knowing it, is that Volcanic Canyon is usually targeted over Sunstone because they just don't want you to draw and ditch a card. But they don't realize that in this deck, when you play Ira, when you play other magics and you're getting those draws, you're doing it anyways. I feel like it's just like a placebo effect at this point. I played Volcanic in 1 match where I was able to draw successfully 1 turn, ditch a card, and it was removed the following turn. So I didn't really, again, like I only have 2 in here for it to be a presentable target in the mirror, but I wasn't playing this. Unless I needed reduction, I would play it. But I only did that once and it was removed the next turn. I didn't even get to draw off of it. So yeah, that's the whole reason it's in here. It's just to say, hey, hit me, I'm standing over here, please don't let me draw. Oh no, please. Because again, our big thing with this combo is Sunstone is a 3 cost. Who works with 3 cost Nexuses, you ask? Bark Maiden. So when we're attacking, ramping onto Sunstone is a bigger payoff than Volcanic Canyon, in my opinion, and in what I experienced. So, and even after the matchups, when I was talking between the red players and the red mirrors and these other scenarios, I would tell them that you tacked this and you probably would have won or had a better time if you hit this other Nexus. Because again, for me, I'm not trying to ditch cards. I don't want to draw an extra card and watch one go to the trash. If something goes to the trash, I need it to be on my terms based on whatever I need at that time. I want all of my cards in my hand. I do not want them going to the trash unless I'm using them for a reason. So that is why Volcanic Canyon was just to a 2, and I did not go any higher than that. Next up, I have to give big shout outs to Zach for just Zach, a notorious purple player, for teaching me that purple removal is kind of nasty, and I agreed. And I played purple for a best of 1 round situation and learned that Deadly Balance and Doubly Deadly and all these other really cool purple cards are wild. And then, you know, Jacob from Main Deck Masters, Scrub Lord, puts out the video talking about Deadly Balance. I cannot tell you how good this card feels in the current format. I will show you where I was able to remove a Tiger by just spending 3 cores and removing a really big body from Deadly Balance. I was able to use in another instance. I was able to use this twice in one turn. Deadly Balance is a very good card because you're able to remove a spirit for as little as 3 cores. That's so good. And then especially with Smog, which is in my deck, getting even 1 reduction off of it to just play a removal for 2 is really good. It's a very strong combo. I was able to play Deadly Balance twice in one turn as a response to keep myself alive. I was able to play Deadly Balance to remove a Tiger. I was able to play Deadly Balance to pop my own Lucerium and drop another card in return because Lucerium already did everything that she could possibly do in that turn. So it's crazy. I also got, in return, in the mirror match, a peer went ahead and double Deadly Balanced me in return. This is just a very good utility magic card for removing if your board is full, if your board is empty. Doing it as a flash response, selecting an exhausted target, selecting something that can be swapped out like Lucerium. Very good utility that opens up a lot of array of options for your deck. So that's why I picked Deadly Balance as a 3 of. Nobody should be surprised anymore. We're all tucking these in. I feel like I literally have so many copies of this card for all the decks that I play. But yeah, so 4 copies of Absolute Ice Shield. You get your life back and you tell your opponent your turn's over. It's a very strong card. I like having this card. It allows this deck, especially knowing that that card is in my hand or knowing that card is in my burst, to play super aggressive. And I feel like that's been the stance for a lot of things, is we will put this burst down and you could always tell when your opponent has it set because the next turn they typically just dive at you. They're like, okay, like he can go in, there's no way he can remove this many cores from my life, blah 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 blah, I'm gonna be okay. And so again, going back to what I was saying before, the reason I wasn't scared of playing when summoned cards is I was looking for, is that card actually in the burst? A lot of times, I'll tell you right now, 90% of the time, if I play a burst, it's this card. I don't play a lot of the other cards that I'm going to show in the burst situation because they just don't work to what I'm trying to do. This card in the burst is exactly what I want to do. I want to keep my life at where I want to keep it. I want to use it when I find it appropriate. I want to make sure that I'm ending things on my terms and not letting the opponent take over. Drawing into this card was huge. Needing it in my hand or in the burst was a must. That's why it was a 4 of. Next up, the thing that ties it all together, Big Bang Energy. Mainly using it for its main effect, which is during this turn, all Star Dragon Spirit cards in your hand have a cost equal to your life total. Star Dragons are so strong right now because of this magic card. Star Dragons being able to cheapen out their summoning cost for nothing after you establish a couple pieces on the board is huge. It's a very big threat. You're able to set up and provide yourself some good reassurance for the next turn or even the turn after, depending on how many cards you had in hand before you ended up, playing this card. As I keep talking about with draw in red, it is very important to have the cores you need to sustain those dragons on the board. And it's also important to have those mini dragons in hand when you're ready to actually play one of these. Can you play one of these for a survival turn? Absolutely. I played this several times to cheapen out getting Star Dragons out that were just too expensive, and I was able to reduce and finally get a board presence because of this card. Was I aggressive with it on some turns? Absolutely, but that didn't always happen. This card, I never once used it for its flash effect. I never used it to boost a spirit. Although the utility, again, talking about multiple options here, is good in that situation. But a lot of times I felt like I was in control of my matches and knowing when something was going to die was okay, where I didn't feel like I had to boost it for any reason. So Big Bang Energy, 100% 4 of in my deck. I know some people played with 3, and I think I saw one with 2. I could be wrong because they were playing the Ancient Dragon. Again, this card, you can play it for 2. It works on so many other spirits. I didn't like Gray, Servant of Seagworm, because even with reduction, it's still 3. And then you have to get rid of the body that turn for an ascend target. It just didn't feel good. Like, Gray felt like too much for too little in return. I'm constantly fishing for Big Bang Energies. If I had one in hand, I felt comfortable, and it gave me reassurance that the next turn could be even if I was in a losing situation, could very much be in my favor. So, Big Bang Energy, amazing card, really good for the archetype, a 4 of in my deck. Next up, no surprise on this one, maybe the ratio will be though. Starblessed Draw, being able to draw 2 cards. That's all I use it for, is drawing 2. Rarely did I ever put this in the burst. I understand you can put it in the burst and draw 4. A lot of times I just didn't have the cores needed in a lot of my practice turns, especially in best of 1. You're not trying to make it look like you have a little amount of cores in play, because you don't want your opponent to think that, oh, he's got nothing he can play in response, I'm just going to dive and kill him here. Being restrictive with your movements and letting them see the things that you're doing sometimes is better than showing them or letting them think what's in the burst, in my opinion. So Starblessed Draw, I moved to a 3 of instead of a 4 of, because we use another thing to draw as well. So overall, I usually just hard play this one. Draw 2, I need those cards in my hand. I'm not waiting to draw based on their response. I need to draw when I need to draw. So I would usually hard play this. Next up, another 3 of Ancient Draw. Boy, do I love Ancient Draw. Several reasons. Ancient Draw is dirty. Like, especially in this deck where you're trying to get to your Ascend targets, drawing 2, putting cards at the bottom. Again, I'm already playing Andromedios, another card that allows me to see 3 cards and put them at the bottom. That's fine. Like, that's what I want to have happen. I know we had a stance with this card a while ago where we thought putting those cards at the bottom of the deck was a hindrance. Let's say you bottomed yourself 3 Ice Shields all of a sudden. They were just stacked together and now they're at the bottom of the deck. That's fine, but it also means that you weren't going to get probably the next piece you needed anyways. Some of the B-roll I'm going to show you, I did do an Ancient Draw and I pulled 3 Smog. Those 3 Smog are not what I needed, but it bailed me out of that turn because although those cards lumped together, it allowed me to get into the next part of my deck a lot faster. I did draw 2 at the start. I did look at 3. Those 3 are not what I wanted. It's not what I was fishing for. So those can absolutely go to the bottom of the deck and stay out of my way. Ancient Draw at several points got me out of several bad instances that I wouldn't have been able to play out of. So, because again, it gives me information, tells me I'm sending this to the bottom. I'm not going to see that anytime soon. If I see another one before that, I'm okay. I can do it again. I can do an Ancient Draw. I can draw 2. I can go for another 3. So it worked really well. I also did not use this for the boosting effect. There was one turn in particular I thought about doing it, but I decided not to because it was better for the draw. And ultimately, that's what won, was being able to hold and just kind of mosey around until it was my turn to do that. Very good card. That's the reason I have a 3 of. All right, now we're getting into the secret spice, right? Why are there blue magic removals in this predominantly red deck, you might ask? Well, let's talk about it. So I did 2 of for Floodstream. Floodstream, if you don't know, it's a burst. When you lose life, I can select something. It has its highest level during this turn, right? Great, that's awesome. Didn't use it for the burst. Again, my big thing is I only play bursts if I know it's going to be something I want or desire at my turn. I don't really care for that effect. I'm mainly playing it for its main or flash effect, which is being able to add up total cost of 5 or fewer and destroy them. I think I used Floodstream once. Not because that was my only choice, but because I have another blue removal that was more important. For the red mirrors especially, and for some other archetypes I was finding out, the BP threshold removal you get from Burning Force, being able to remove 3k or lower, Ritual Fire, all these other things, BP at some point in the game just kind of goes into the wind, and BP doesn't become so much of an issue as it does about the body that's on board. I kept thinking to myself, how do I remove the body if the BP is out of reach? We have to target something else. And so in this instance, Floodstream worked out really good. Floodstream was mainly in here because I did play into some token aggressive decks, and those decks were really scary. Even with a Sunstone Temple in play and me drawing cards off the interaction, it did not matter. They were able to close me out. Floodstream will target tokens. So if they go wide on tokens, regardless of BP or anything else, I can just hit those and remove all of them in one cast. It's a very good removal. That's why I went with 2 of. The last card, the other blue. Why? This card bailed me out several times, and I only had a 2 of. Originally, I had a 4 of this in my deck, but I was like, you know what? Tokens are scary. I want some Flood Stream, so I took my blue magic room of 4 cards, 4 Raging Tides, sized it down to 2, and went 2 Flood Streams, and that was the ratio I submitted. I had my deck submitted Monday before the deck submission was due Friday, so that's how, like, in it I was with this ratio, and I was like, this is comfortable, I like this, we're sticking with it. This card, destroy all spirits that cost 3 or fewer that are not tokens. Again, Floodstream, we're attacking tokens. We want to remove those things that are scary that don't cost anything, but there's just a lot of them. Floodstream's good for that. Raging Tide, as the B-roll will show, is a good way of removing things without worrying about BP. I do not like having to worry or stress about where somebody wants to put their cores. I just want to be able to remove the target because there's so many of them out there. Raging Tide allows you to go wider, allows you to do more than one target, and it rewards you. If you take 2 or more spirits that are destroyed by this effect, you can place a core from the void into your reserve. It's also a ramp. I will gladly pay the 5. Even at full, which I did do, I paid the 5. It made way more sense to do that and remove scary things than it would have if I would have had a cost reduction with Burning Force, because again, Burning Force will only be able to target 3,000 or fewer BP. A lot of the things in some instances were not at that BP anymore, and if there isn't a Nexus for me to worry about, it's just a dead card in hand. Raging Tide and Floodstream in my test performed a lot better than Burning Force or other things were able to. So that's why I made it a 2 of in this deck. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, RPG Zeeg, what do I do? If I want to sleeve this up and play, what am I looking for? I was mulliganing like crazy. Cards you're looking for in starting turn: a Sunstone Temple, a Bark Maiden, an Andromedios, an Ice Shield, a Big Bang. My starting hand has so many successes, I feel like, compared to a lot of other things I went into. I don't need a lot to be successful, and my ratios on those cards are so high. I'm looking for a Sunstone Temple. I want that to be my turn 1. I'm looking for a Bark Maiden. I want that to be my turn 1 as well. An Ice Shield, being able to tell the opponent your turn is over. I didn't get the best starting hand, but I can still attempt to try again. That's fine. A Big Bang with some Star Dragons, absolutely. It's a good starting hand. Even in some mulligan situations, all I had was a Star Blast, or all I had was an Ancient Draw. That's fine. We go second. Let's go ahead and get our 5 cores on second turn and pull an Ancient Draw instead. Draw 2, look 3, see if we get a target. If not, we learned what the next 3 cards are and we sent those to the bottom if they weren't useful. It's okay. So my success, I feel like, is in a really good situation with my starting hand. The only match I lost, and after I went back and watched it, I think I could have won, but that's besides the point. I drew into bad things despite a very good starting hand. I drew into 4 Smogs back to back, and that really slowed me down because I couldn't get into combos, I couldn't get into anything. And as I showed earlier, some of the B-roll I played is we did an Ancient Draw, revealed 3, and sent Smogs to the bottom. That's a good situation to be in. We're sending things that we don't need to the bottom, and we know where those cards are at now. The rest of our deck is now just the rest of the puzzle we have to figure out as we draw through it. And so it was really interesting. Other things that I feel like made it successful compared to where I feel like people would have maybe tunnel visioned a little bit, I know I did, is I'm stupid. I'll admit it. One of the things you can do in this deck that's a very interesting combo is if you do pull both your Novas for some reason, you can heal Nova, ascend Nova on a target, and then ascend Nova again if you have the resources to do it, and you can heal. Nova is Seagworm in name. For whatever reason, my brain just calls this card Nova, so I never think about Seagworm actually being in the name. It was a misplay I made in one of the matches that caused me the loss. Could I still have lost even going back to 5? Absolutely, but it's definitely something I realized afterwards and I wanted to bring it up. Next thing, I feel like a lot of people just don't tend to realize, Nova is still very good by himself. Although Ira can clear a board, as some of this B-roll is going to show, you are able to clear the board, and especially if you're up against another double symbol, if the BP threshold is something you can reach, I was able to cleave in a Hydra with this, and I was able to remove a big threat. It felt very interesting to just look at a Hydra and say, hi, Nova's here, goodbye you sitting at 7,000, goodbye. And that felt rewarding. So in most situations where you might have said, oh, Nova's not going to do so great, I'm just going to go Ira and try to swing for 2 despite them having a blocker. Nova removed a lot of options, as did Ira, but the fact you can just cleave a double symbol like that if it's under that threshold, that's great. That's a good turn for you, and your opponent didn't pay attention to what you had, and you get to, come out on top for that reason. The later game plays are mainly focusing on big bang energy. You're trying to big bang, you're trying to play all these Star Dragons at once. If you played well, you drew a lot of cards in the early to mid game, and then you're rewarded for it by just being able to dive and go in. And so with all this kind of stuff we just kind of talked about and looking at the deck and the reason it works so well, and hopefully some of my mental or me talking through it makes some sense to some of you, I feel like this is why the deck performed really well. And again, had I won that one match, that the only one that I lost, I don't know who I would have gone up against next, and I don't know if my deck would have performed as well going up against something I didn't experience. So again, all I got was 4th place. That is still pretty big considering there was I think 77 or 72 registered folks that went. And I'm very pleased with my performance. It's probably the best I've ever done. And the fact, we ended up on an Eggman list, that's super sick. If anybody sees that, clicks on that, and starts sleeving up the deck, let me know. I want to know how it performed, or what some things are that you ran into that you feel like weren't all that great, or things you believe could be improved. I mean, obviously I ran this deck for a while and critiqued it a little bit, but if there's more things you guys are playing, or that there's just this weird deck you can't get around, hit me up, leave me a comment, let me know what you thought of the video as well. In the meantime, if you guys see me in one of the Summoner Duels, tell me you watched the video. This one's gonna take me a bit to work on. But in the meantime, I hope you guys had fun. I had fun reviewing the deck, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.